Just a couple of questions, Lester. One with a comment on Māori responsiveness and engagement. I agree and want to congratulate Auckland Transport on the engagement with Māori, with mana whenua. The same can't be said about the responsiveness to with mā tāwaka, and it's a big question. and I suppose my question is, does Auckland Transport have any idea of its responsiveness to mā tāwaka, which is a bit different to your iwi engagement, mana whenua engagement?
Just on a conceptual level, good question, because I'm just thinking, in health we have a different approach, actually, just thinking about that we have in Auckland Transport. So we run two separate processes, basically. So maybe you might want to comment, David, but I think it's really a good stimulus for us because people like myself are very used to working in this way in healthcare, and maybe it's something we need to explore more deeply in transport. David?
I couldn't give you some hard numbers right now, but we'll certainly look into it and come back to you.
Okay, and then I'll also get a link between our people in healthcare and the people in Auckland Transport to show what we do in healthcare, because that seems to be working well. Thank you.
Just another question on social media. Does Auckland Transport have a social media strategy, or is it just a
communications?
A sort of oh look, we better put something on Twitter? Do you actually have a social media strategy?
Yes.
Yes.
And if you have, can I have a look?
We have a strategy, and you may have a look.
Can you sort of get it out to everybody? Just I'm not want to delve into any of your secrets or anything, but I'm mindful that what you put up on the screen, one of the slides about social media and how effective a tool in the digital age social media is, and I think it's important that our organisations, however big and however small, have some semblance of a social media strategy going forward.
So no, we do. We'll make that available, but I think it would be fair to say that we're in the early part of our trajectory in terms of our implementation, but absolutely understand the essential nature of it. You cannot not be in that space if you want the immediacy. And particularly for us, on the one hand, there's marketing, but on the other hand, a lot of what we're involved in is making the public aware of potential issues and dangers and the like. And so in that respect, you have to be at the forefront of this. So yes, we have a strategy. We're in the early part of the trajectory of the implementation, but more and more emphasis will go on this, in the same way as more and more emphasis will go on the behavioural aspects of altering the way people think about transport.
Thank you.
Right, so members, I just remind you we're 3/4 of an hour behind, and we've got two sets of board and executive teams behind us. So we have Councillor Darby, Councillor Mike and Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair, and gentlemen, thank you. And I also echo the Mayor's acknowledgement of the phenomenal numbers that are on the PT network. And for me, that's the congestion I'm most interested in, the congestion on trains, buses, and to a lesser extent ferries every morning. It's quite phenomenal. So just in terms, I've always heard, Lester, and you've reiterated that the best dollar spent in transport is the TDM dollar. You get the most bang for your buck out of the TDM dollar. And you're saying that that's where we get the best results, but I'm just wondering what we need to do, what's in the way politically possibly for us to back you and say we want you to go hard in the low cost TDM space where you get best results that you just mentioned. And that's not just a reallocation of road space and carpooling and T2s, it's a lot more than that. If that is where we get the best bang and best results, as you've just told us, What do we need to do politically, and what do you need to do? What's in the way of us doing that now?
Just for clarity, because I'm not always 100% of acronyms. I'm in lots of different industries, and they've all got the same acronyms that mean different things. So could you just make sure we talk about the same
travel demand management area.
Yeah, well, I actually think, well, the more that I think about this and us together in Auckland Transport, the more effort we have to make in this, because in the end, you know, we cannot continue to just invest in capital projects at the same rate. That's not going to be possible long term. There's a lot we have to do, but that cannot be a straight line. It's just not possible. So there's demand management and there's new technology. And the behaviour changes in both of those. And I think that rather than maybe extend this conversation, I think this would be a great topic for our next workshop, which if we could have sooner than later, would be really good, and we could throw our ideas together collectively. But I actually believe that there is the younger population that are a great receptor site for this, and I think that we need to really push this really hard, because it's not going to be possible to carry on the same way. And I think once we get some changes made through early adoption, then we'll be able to get more and more. But in the end, I think if we had a joint workshop on that and found where we want to put the priority, the best way to spend money, for sure. David, you may.
I think, Councillor Darby, there's probably being addressed at multiple levels. So we actually have a TravelWise program that actually works through all the communities and businesses on travel demand management within the communities. AT is actually starting a flexible work program as a conscious work stream to see if we can change the number of people that need to travel, the time they travel, the locations of their work, almost as our own pilot. So there's no point preaching the message of flexible work and flexible activity if we don't actually check it out ourselves. So we're running that. So at that behavioural level, we're actively involved. We're actively involved, as I've said, in the, what I'll call it, the digital space, to get more interface and a higher utilisation of the asset that's currently moving around the network. We are trying to increase the network. We've got over 80 double-deckers running now, and we're looking at, if you like, improving the rapid transit lanes so we can move more people faster in particular areas as part of the new network rollout. That obviously is a challenge because of the road space, the parking, the conflicts in the community, and we just have to be sensitive and gentle about that. The speed of delivery will make us be seen to be more brutal than we are already perceived in some quarters. And the last area that I would say is we actually have a technology digital program where we're actually looking at globally at high technology, rapid transit, autonomous vehicle type activities, which is actually the next paradigm, and we think we may have some options on that.
Okay, let's pick that up in a workshop then.
Yeah, but just maybe one last comment on that. You know, I think that the council and us can really work closely together on this, because what we're talking about here is a mindset change, a mindset shift. And, you know, in order for us to do this, then it does need to be some campaign. I just like to use the example of the bus strike last year. And when the bus strike happened, there were predictions of, you know, Carmageddon, and there was going to be absolute chaos. Well, it was one of the most organised days on the road that we had, and that is because people actually started to think about choices they would make, and organisations ran their own internal car-sharing schemes or matching people. And so I think that is a classic example how if people actually start thinking about things and are careful about the choices that they make, that you can actually have a big impact on congestion. We just have to find out how we make that mindset, because that was a reactive response to the bus strike. We need to see how we can make this as a proactive response.
And just as we're seeing in the city centre as well.
Yes, indeed.
So just second question, I'll be very quick, Mr Chair, I know we've got to conclude. So you mentioned the EMUs has got to be, we've got to do some thinking around that. Norwest Busway to be accelerated in Amity. So, David, last time I think we spoke here was about the possible transfer of Mill Road, and that's the board is advancing that, I believe. But there were some other ideas about transferring and offloading the Norwest Busway in its entirety, the Greville Road Station as part of the Northern Corridor improvements, and possibly even Pen Link. But you wanted to establish a rationale for why you would offload. Has that rationale been developed within Auckland Transport? Is the board working on that? And the other question related is with Amity. I understand from my discussions with the outgoing regional director for NZTA, there's a willingness to adjust the FAR for Amity. Is that progressing to allow the progression of Amity at a faster rate?
So on your first question, I have written to, and there is dialogue with NZTA, who are the adjudicators, if you like, as to what is a state highway and what isn't. So the first issue is if a Mill Road or a Pen Link was designated to be a state highway, then NZTA would carry all the costs due to design consulting, and the funds that we've already invested in, say, Mill Road, would get returned to us and we'd be able to use them in another area. So that, in my view, that was the conversation that I had with you. That's the rational basis on which that's done, and it's really just the reverse process of when a state highway gets vested in us and becomes an arterial after they build a motorway, for example. So that's with NZTA. They have come back and said they are thinking about it positively, and I suspect it will come out of the conversations that are around the budget and the indications of subsequent conversations with regard to capital investment. So they've got to decide how they're going to handle that. And it is Mill Road, for example, integrally woven with the HIF program and how that might be managed. So the same principles true for the Northwestern and the Northern Busway, etc. The discussion around Amity, I have also written to NZTA specifically, and this is a funding discussion, not a strategic road classification discussion, and said that if they had some funds available, then would they consider altering the FAR rate for us for Amity, because it is our top priority. It actually needs a big slug of money. You can't do Amity and drip feed of $10 million a year because that's all we've got available. And if they change the FAR to 90% rather than 50%, we could actually do 200 plus million a year on Amity, and the council's component would then be manageable at 20 versus the 200. But that's a formal letter sitting with NZTA, and they're doing a review on that in terms of their funding allocation. I suggest they've got two options on that. One is how much funds may be left in the last of this GPS cycle that may allow something to happen, and the other is what they might feed into the next GPS cycle in terms of the next round of the RLTP and the NLTF. So that's where that's sitting. I would remind all of you, though, that, and I know I'm a stuck record on it, after you make a decision to spend 100 million, it's probably going to take you 12 to 18 months to be able to start spending it. You can't start a $100 million project instantly. It's the commitment of the money being available for 3 or 5 years, which is not happening, and that's the killer for efficient capital works program delivery.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your time, Chair.
Right. We have two more councillors. Councillor Mike Lee and Councillor Simpson, and that's it.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. Can I thank Richard for the very fulsome response to the inquiry from my advisor, Councillor Support, over two aspects of the rail operation, passenger kilometres and cost of EMU maintenance. And I have to say it sparked off a very fulsome report from Richard, a copy to the Mayor, copy to Ms Tyndall and lots of other people. Thank you for that. I will be responding, and I may need some other pieces of information. Thank you. The second point I want to make is David mentioned planning for transport for Auckland International Airport. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, excluding heavy rail from the mix is very short-term thinking. Selling Auckland International Airport short, selling Auckland short, selling New Zealand short, and I really urge you to think seriously about future-proofing a rail link, the 6.8 kilometre rail link to Puenui, because Auckland Transport has blocked, in effect, the rail link from Onehunga. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Right, Councillor Simpson, you're going to be straight to the
No,
point.
I will give most of my questions offline. I'll just say one thing. First of all, congratulations on being more open and transparent with your information, and that's something that Councillor Clough and myself are interested in this committee as well. I'm interested, Lester, in your comments around the congestion report to your board. I think it would be very useful to have a congestion section and where it is and what we're doing about it in these reports, because quite frankly, from my opinion, Auckland thinks that Auckland Transport has a real problem with Auckland has a real problem with regards to congestion and wants to see what's being done about it. And whilst this report covers different things, at the end of the day, that's the killer, isn't it? We are a congested city. We need to do something about that. What are we doing and what do we still need to do, and where are the real issues? So I just think that would be a really valuable contribution to this report. Thank you.
Could I just say that our open board report has a plethora of information in it, including there's quite a congestion section in the previous month's one.
Okay,
also the ferry patronage and information like that. So one of those weekends that Councillor McKinnon, Sir Don McKinnon mentions, it's a good read.
Right, okay, thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank
For the
you.
opportunity. Thank you, councillors.
Trust I'll see you again.